Okay, these notes are going to cover 5.14 Integrated Pest Management. It's also abbreviated IPM. So, IPM basics. So, IPM uses a variety of pest control methods that minimize the environmental disruption and they minimize pesticide use. So, if we can do things to minimize the chemicals that we're using that actually disrupt the environmental um, services that are taking place on the land or the processes that are taking place, that's actually a good thing. So there's a lot of research and a lot of monitoring and pest that a lot of monitoring of pests that goes into crop development. And researchers are generally looking for ways to target specific pest life cycles. So if they can interrupt like just the specific life cycle of the specific pest that they're trying to target, that's actually a really beneficial um, uh, beneficial method. And so IPM is considered a biocontrol. It's bringing, or one facet of IPM, I guess, is using a biocontrol where you bring in a natural predator or a natural parasite to control the pest. Another method to minimize environmental disruption is to include crop rotation and then also to use intercropping. Intercropping is where we have various crops planted with various types of crops planted beside each other in a field. So, biocontrol, again, that's where we introduce that natural predator, a parasite, or a competitor to control the pest population. This can actually include purchasing and spreading the controlled organisms in fields or building homes for them by planting habitat that they need that would attract them naturally. So, an example that I think of immediately when I think of purchasing and then spreading the controlled organism are ladybugs for aphids. So, farmers were bringing in Asian ladybugs to destroy aphids on crops. And then these ladybugs, unfortunately, an unintended consequence is that the population of these ladybugs actually kind of grew out of control. And we find these ladybugs everywhere now. They've really become an invader species as opposed to now, they are controlling aphids, but they've also become an invader species. Another thing that you can do is another control method would be to introduce spiders into an area. Spiders feed on insects, and so introducing that natural predator can actually keep the population of pest species low. And then parasitic wasps, if you're trying to get rid of caterpillars, parasitic wasps will lay their eggs within the growing caterpillar larva. And then when their larva reach maturity, it'll kill the caterpillar, and the wasps will then emerge from the baby wasps, which are now adults, will emerge from the caterpillar carcass. Uh, Another method of IPM involves crop rotation. So many pests prefer one specific crop or a type of crop, like a type of legume. So they'll lay their eggs in the soil, and when the larvae hatch, they now have their food source. But if we're rotating crops, on a regular basis each season, this actually prevents the pests from becoming established in that area because it disrupts that preferred food choice. And now they don't have that to feed on. So it actually deters them from laying their eggs in an area. Or if they do happen to start to have a population growth, it will actually stop that in its tracks the next growing season. This also not only takes care of pest species, but this also disrupts weed growth. Since we can plant different crops at different times, you're hardly ever going to have bare soil that would then go through secondary succession and be taken over by, other plants that you don't want to have there. Intercropping is another method that can be used. It's kind of a push-pull system. And so what that means is that push plants emit these volatile chemicals that just naturally repel plants. So you can use things like Napier grass, which actually lets off a chemical that attracts the moss that would normally feed on soybeans or corn. They'll now go to the Napier grass and feed on the grass as opposed to feeding on the corn and the soybeans. And so that's one way that you can keep them out of your um, out of your crop species that or your crop fields that you're trying to, grow and get a profit from. So that's considered a pull plant. It's pulling the plants away. And then a push plant is something that emits a chemical that just keeps the plants away or keeps the pest away from everything in the field. So pull plants pull the pest to the plant. Push plants kind of emit chemicals that just get them out of the entire field. So this can provide habitat. These pole plants can provide habitat because they actually use chemicals to attract predators or to attract the pests to them. So what are some benefits and some drawbacks of IPM? Well, first of all, it reduces death and mutation of these non-target species. So you get rid of these dangerous chemicals that caused unintended consequences with other organisms. So the atrazine, like we talked about earlier, DDT, which killed off a lot of our bald eagles, and then glyphosate, which is killing off bees, that we get rid of that. And so that's a really good intended consequence, I guess, with not using chemicals. It also reduces the effects on human consumers. So we're using less pesticides. Pesticides in high enough concentrations are actually known carcinogens, which means they cause cancer. And it can also reduce contamination of surface and groundwater because now we won't have as many pesticides that are part of our agricultural runoff running into our waterways. A drawback of IPM is that it is definitely more time consuming and more costly than just simply crop dusting with pesticides. So applying a chemical is super easy, it's super fast, and it's less expensive generally. Um, Researching like the specific pest that's going to get rid of another, researching the actual pest and then coming up with the integrated pest management approach takes a lot of research. And it sometimes even involves planting numerous other species of crops, which is also very costly. So those are some of the major drawbacks of IPM. So here is our FRQ for this section. You're going to justify whether or not these data support the use of a biocontrol method of limiting pest damage. And I think our next set of notes will be on sustainable agriculture. And I will see you guys next time.